It is a pleasure to spend this time together today. Thank you for your interest in this topic, creating a strategic talent structure. This has been an area that we've spent a lot of time and energy in over the past 8 months. We've got a lot of exciting stuff to share with you, some new service offerings, not that we're going to be pitching service offerings, but new ways that we're finding opportunities to partner with strategic executives. And what we're going to do today is we're going to share with you some of the best insights and the key decision points that the really strategic leaders that we have the opportunity to work with are working through themselves. So it's kind of our way to create a little bit of a learning environment and make sure you're equipped with this knowledge as well, so you can bring it back to your organizations. And again, if this title interests you, help create a strategic talent structure to help your business grow. So just a little bit about strategic talent partners. And I'm going to give a little more context because we are graced with some new names and new faces. And so if you are new to our webinars, welcome. It is especially nice to see names that maybe we aren't as familiar with. If you've been to past webinars, welcome back. It's always fun to be able to continue the conversation and discuss how you can use your talent to help your company grow. Strategic Talent Partners as a company, we've been around for about 1.5 years, but that is like just the very itty bitty of our story because, as an organization, we actually are 2 combined companies, Core Talent and Keystone Executive Search. Those firms have been around for 25 years. And throughout those 25 years, as it says on the screen, we have had thousands of conversations. And Mary, you're right at the top of the leaderboard in terms of how many discussions around talent strategy and leadership strategy have we had. Yeah. And we're really, really passionate about making sure that leaders have the talent, the leadership capability that they need in their organizations to do the great work that their companies are designed to do. So I don't know, Mary, anything you want to say just about who we are and our mission?
I think as a business owner myself, one of the reasons that Mike Frommelt from Keystone Executive Search and myself decided to merge our organizations is that we are approaching our own exit plan. And it gave us an opportunity to kind of bring the best of each of our collective companies and our service offerings together. And we are, literally building our own strategic talent structure for our future that goes out about 5 years when Mike and I will no longer be in the day-to-day part of the organization. And so it's really exciting to be able to bring some of these ideas and concepts to other business owners because we're really passionate about helping you, create some freedom and independence from the day-to-day, but also to create value within your organization. And really the best way to do that is through your leadership team and your overall leaders. So we're excited to talk about this today.
Yeah, and if I could just add one quick note. So Core Talent and Keystone Executive Search, obviously extremely strong reputation in terms of executive search, bringing in top tier leadership talent into companies to help them grow. This kind of extends to the next slide. So maybe I'll just kind of use this as a segue into our backgrounds. Mary, you and I, we've known each other for a long, long time. Yeah. And I grew my career working in larger companies in the Twin Cities area. So, a large domestic private company, a large international public company. Most recently, I was at a Fortune 10 company here in town. So I've done this work in a lot of different shapes and phases. And my primary background is after a leader is hired, how do they continue to grow and develop? And how do we make sure we have good succession plans in place? And how do we make sure people are getting the coaching and the feedback that they need? And so, as you and I, we would talk from time to time. And, I would love getting updates in terms of how you were growing your business. And you were so kind in saying, hey, Rick, what are the kind of things you're working on? And then and I'm going to just tell this bit of the story because I think this is an important part. You won Businesswoman of the Year and you're blowing up my LinkedIn. And I was like, Mary, we got to get lunch. And you said, Rick, it's time for you to join our team. And the opportunity was, you can't just hire in executive leadership talent and hope your company can grow. You also have to support the leaders that are already there. And I was at a point in time where kind of corporate life was grinding on me. I didn't know if I wanted to sort of sit in that rat race for the rest of my career. And it has been a blast to take sort of the tools and experience that I've had in large corporations and leverage our relationships with these entrepreneurial, creative, exciting, small to medium-sized businesses, and just create a really, really strong partnership. So it's just been a lot of fun. I don't know, Mary, you want to talk a little bit about your background?
Well, no, I think the key thing or takeaway is that Mike and I both believe, even though our primary service offerings have been executive search, that it's always best to develop within if you have that opportunity. And so today we're going to kind of talk about growth and the timing around that. And I hope that you walk away with the idea that you don't always have to go outside, and if you can plan well enough ahead of time, you can in fact develop key people in your organization to support you through that growth. So
Yeah. Or at
yeah,
least make it an intentional decision, right? It's
exactly.
intentional if we're developing insight. It's intentional because we know that we need to go outside. And here's how we can explain that to our team. So let me just tell you a quick story. Um, so this is a client that we've had the opportunity to partner with for several years. I love this client. They have a soft spot in my heart. The very first time I was speaking with the CEO of this organization, I was kind of doing my normal intake questions, and I was asking some of the problems and trying to get to kind of secondary issues or root causes. And, then finally I got towards the end of the conversation. I said, if you could wave a magic wand, what would success look like? And the CEO kind of paused and thought for a second. And he said, Rick, it would look like the way it was in 2016. And I was kind of like, oh, like just made me feel kind of sad for this executive, because what he was saying is, I want to go back to an environment where maybe we were smaller, maybe it felt like we were a little more nimble. I kind of knew everyone's name, right? The irony is that this client had experienced a lot of success. So they had grown rapidly over a handful of years, and the CEO wasn't feeling as equipped, didn't know if he had the right people in the right seats, didn't know if the organization had the right structure to be successful. So there was a lot of work that this organization needed to do. The takeaway for today, and what I've told other executives in similar spots, is that they had earned the right to need to solve these bigger, more complex problems because they've delivered so much value in their marketplaces. They've grown, and they've grown quickly, and that's an exciting thing. And so part of our mission today, part of our goal, is to inspire you, not to shy away from growth or step back from what you think your organizations are fully capable of, but to really lean into it and say, you know what, we've got this exciting business strategy, and we have an equally compelling talent strategy to make sure that we have confidence in what we think we can achieve. Okay, so how are we going to get there? We've got three main topics we're going to cover, and I'm going to go through all three of these topics relatively quickly because, as my team knows, I tend to pack more than 60 minutes worth of content into our 60-minute webinars. So the disclaimer is, I might go a little faster than you want me to, but I'm always happy to have follow-up conversations. So ask questions, put things in the chat. But if you want to continue the discussion beyond today's webinar, we will absolutely make it easy for you to get a hold of us. So Mary's actually going to go through the growth leadership model. She's got some exciting stuff to share about that. And then we'll kind of together go through the strategic talent roadmap. And then there are some very good practical insights we want to talk about. An important aspect of the STR, the strategic talent roadmap, and that is the org chart of the future. So these are the three things we're going to cover. Now, I want some input from you, from our audience members. So I think we all kind of understand how chats work. The question on the screen, you can't see it. Okay, here it is. Question on the screen is, instead years, I know how the structure of my company will be different, right? So we're all planning on growing, right? You wouldn't be here if you weren't planning on growing. How confident are you around what your future organization is going to look like from a structure perspective? So in the chat, I'm curious, are you super confident? You strongly agree with this statement? That would be a 5. Are you not at all sure? You haven't thought about it really? That'd be a 1, or kind of somewhere in between. Mike is a 5. That's fantastic. Anne's a 4. So we got a savvy group here in terms of input coming in. Look at this. You know, with all these 4s and 5s, I might be careful what you wish for, because I might start calling on the audience and say, hey, what are you doing? Not relevant. Appreciate the honesty there. Thank you. Alexa, thank you for the 3. That's brave. You're being a little bit vulnerable. That's good.
I'm not quite sure how to help you with that.
Did you guys? That was my Alexa in the background. Sorry, she was chiming in.
Wrong
Okay,
Alexa.
let's move on to the next question. Yeah. Let's move on to the next question. Okay, in 7 years, I know what roles I will have on my leadership team. So this is the new one. It's a common challenge, by the way, as the business grows. This is something we're going to talk about throughout our webinar today. As the business grows, leadership roles need to grow too. Sometimes you need to add a new leadership role. Sometimes leadership roles look a lot further expanded. Okay. Oh, so our scores are going down a little bit. Garrett, thank you for your honesty. Same with Anne, Alexa. Mike is typing.
I'm not quite sure how to
5.
help you with that.
Rick, you can't say Alexa's name.
Oh, that's what. Hang on.
I love it.
The digital. That I'm actually. I don't think you can turn your mic. I would guess that happens to you a lot.
Alexa, she put in the chat, and it happens all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, we've got some more. Okay, 5. Mike, you got a 5. Good. Oh, yeah, that's because you just went through this with Mike Frommel. That's right. So you should know some of this.
Yeah.
Okay, this is an easier up or down, yes or no. I've created org chart of the future for my 5-year goals. So Mike V, you should say yes. And the reason we ask yes or no is because we work with a lot of EOS or entrepreneurial operating system companies that run on EOS, run on Traction. Sometimes org chart of the future is part of your work with an implementer. We've also come to appreciate there's a really wide spectrum in terms of what creating an org chart of the future actually looks like. So if the answer is no, and I can say Alexa because I turned it off, Ann and Alexa and Kelly, if the answer is no, totally fine. We're going to equip you with the remaining 45 minutes, and then we're going to give you the tools and resources to go further if you want. If the answer is yes, we're hopefully going to get you to think maybe a little more strategically than you are right now. I'm going to sort of stretch your ability to think about what it actually means to create an org chart of the future for my business. And one more quick story before we dive into our content. So this, I'll be very honest, this is kind of like 10 or 12 stories packed into one short story. But it's not uncommon that, you know, as we're working with a new client and as we're just getting started on a project, whether it's search or solutions, we're learning about the business, we're learning about their goals. And I have never failed to be amazed at how cool business plans can be and how exciting business goals are and the thoughtfulness and the strategy. It's always an engaging conversation. And then as we start to learn and kind of get a grasp in terms of how the business is going to grow and what the strategy is, we'll often ask the question, who do you have tapped to do? Like, this is a lot of work. Who's going to actually do it? And that's where the quote on the screen comes out. We'll figure that part out, you know? And so kind of the simple takeaway, right? We've kind of spoken about some of the more technical takeaways. The simple takeaway is that we'll figure it out. You should know. And we're going to talk about how do you know exactly who you're going to tap and exactly how they're going to add value so you can create more confidence in your business goals. And the first little bit of insights that we're going to cover is around our growth leadership model. And this is a very new and exciting tool. We're kind of just in the process of rolling the growth leadership model out. Mary created it, and it's been just a delight to kind of learn the strategy and the vision and how this model adds value to business leaders in terms of what they need, why they need it, where they're going, and what their expectations should be. So Mary, I'm going to actually turn it over to you to walk us through this.
Well, and I will, you said Mary created it. I put it on paper and made it look pretty. Well, I didn't make it look pretty. I put it on paper. But really, this is the culmination of work that both Mike and I have been doing with our executive search clients for the last 25 years. When we come in and start scoping out a role, we always start with the business. And so really understanding where is the business at today, not just in terms of revenue and profitability and number of people, but really, talking about your growth goals, and how the timing of that, and how complex is your organization, and what does the current structure look like? Because as we're scoping out a leadership role, we need to be not only accounting for the profile as it sits today, but also, what that position is going to be accountable for the future, and a minimum of 3 years out. And so oftentimes we're looking at 5 or, even sometimes 7, 10 years out. And so through the course of our discovery, we're oftentimes talking about, the structure. And we've kind of put together these 4 buckets that really capture the essence of what it looks like to be at a foundational level versus emerging versus scaling, and then ultimately enterprise. And typically in the enterprise, you're probably around that 100 million plus in terms of revenue, and well over like 300 employees. But as you go through these different stages, it's really important to understand who the decision makers are, because now at the emerging or scaling, you're introducing oftentimes middle management. And now how does your senior leadership team work with and continue to develop that middle management, and et cetera, et cetera. You get into scaling, where you start thinking about building more value in your business beyond the founder, beyond the CEO and president. And how do you scale through your people? And so, we oftentimes just talk through these various stages. And if you go to the next slide, Rick, this is where we really get into the leadership skills and competencies required of these various roles. And, at the foundational level, all leaders lead people, right? But when you get into the emerging phase of an organization, your leaders are now leading other leaders. And you get into scaling, and now you have to be able to influence further down the organization. And so we actually have a competency model that shows some of the differences of a growth-based leader and what those skills need to look like as you scale your organization, because it really does change. And so I know you probably can't read all of this, but this will be included in the deck. And as Rick said, we're happy to dive into this further. One thing I like to say, in a more mature organization at your highest level, there's really 2 things that are most important for your most senior leadership team. One is to act and think strategically, every single day. And the other is to not only develop leaders, but develop leaders who are also developing other leaders. And if you can get to that point with your most senior leadership team, there's just no stopping your ability to scale and to ultimately grow. So we'll talk more about this, but this is kind of the grounding that we like to use at the beginning of this because leaders look different in every size and complexity of an organization. And that's part of the challenge, but
Yeah.
also the opportunity.
That's so well said. And you think about the thousands of conversations that you've had and Mike's had and our executive recruiters have had. A lot of those conversations stem back to like, what kind of leader do I need in my organization? And when I think about just the true value and the incredible insights that this model provides, it helps executives start to scope out, okay, do I really need a chief officer? Yes, I might want a chief officer, but is that what my business needs based on where I'm at and where I'm going? Do I need a VP? Do I need maybe someone who can just get the work done, right? Who can mobilize the team and just get the work done? And so that's just a snippet of it, right? You also talked about what are the skills that are going to be required to be successful? What are the tools and resources? What are sort of the organizational structures that we need to have? So there's a lot of depth to this model. But at the highest level, those words on the bottom of the screen, I think ring true. Do I need a leader who's just a good manager who can lead others? Do I need a leader who can lead leaders? Do we need a functional leader or do I need an enterprise leader? Excellent. Okay. Let's move to building a strategic talent roadmap. So once you start to understand where you are on that model, right? What bucket, what one of those 4 buckets am I in? Then you can start to ground yourself in terms of saying, what are the key problems that I need to solve, right? How am I going to set my leaders and my team up for success so that I can successfully navigate into that next bucket, right? I can continue to grow and grow sustainably. The strategic talent roadmap is your path, is your guide in terms of how you continue to grow, how you navigate the challenges from going from one bucket in the growth leadership model to the next. And the kind of challenges are the same, right? Whether you're going from scaling to emerging or emerging to, foundational to emerging to scaling to enterprise. There we go. I got it. There are the same set of challenges. It's just how you solve them is a little bit different. So I'm going to walk through some of those key decision points. And again, I'm going to walk through it relatively quickly because I don't need you to be an expert today. I just need you to understand what they mean. And then as it relates to this future organization chart, that's often where we spend a lot of time and energy in the strategic talent roadmap. And so we're going to equip you with making sure you can overcome some key challenges. So the first challenge we're going to talk about, or the first step, I should say, is growth trajectory. It's a very useful exercise to get a leadership team together in a room and start talking about what our growth trajectory is. I am entirely confident that your leadership team understands, has contributed to, embraces your business plan. In our experience, even if there's buy-in to the business plan, there is still some level of uncertainty around how fast can we grow and how much do we want to grow. And that's really the fuzzy part of a business plan that this step is intended to clarify.
And
Yeah.
Rick, if I can interject, which areas grow faster?
Yeah.
And which ones grow first, right?
Yep.
Because there's oftentimes interdependencies that aren't often, communicated at this at the stage of creating this growth strategy. So you gotta get under the covers.
Yeah, and the story there, Mary, I know you've heard me tell the story before, as we were working with a manufacturing client, and you're just kind of assuming if you're working with a manufacturing client, if they're going to hit their growth goals, they need to add manufacturing capacity. So we're going through this exercise, we're talking about growth trajectory, and the sales leader says, hey, slow down, everybody. We're nowhere near staffed in sales to drive the kind of leads that we would need to hit our revenue targets. If we have even a fighting chance at hitting our growth goals, we need to really seriously look at the sales function. So it was a very cool conversation because it helped the team understand exactly what does the business need in order to be successful, in order to have confidence in its ability to hit its goals. And by the way, for those of you who have heard me tell that story, because I've told that story a couple of times, I have an update. And that is that this is a business that was pretty heavily impacted by tariffs. There was a lot of uncertainty in Q1. I just reconnected with the leadership team a couple weeks ago. They're doing great. And they're doing great because they were able to quickly and easily align around how to address these challenges, have confidence in their staffing. We've got the right people doing the right things in order to give us confidence. So they kind of stuck to their plan. They rode through the uncertainty, and their back half of the year looks very, very strong. So the business results were absolutely boosted because they've thought through a lot of the strategic talent roadmap concepts. The simple math related to growth trajectory is if you're going to grow a lot and you're going to grow quickly, you got to buy talent. There's just no way around it. So then it's, what is the key talent? What's our right next hire? How do we make sure we're getting the right experience and skills that put us in a position to grow? If you're looking longer term, if you're being proactive, you have the great fortune to be able to develop some of that talent internally, or at least make a more intentional choice, like we talked about a handful of minutes ago. So you can think about, who do I want to elevate? Who are my key leaders that I think are capable of taking on more? How can I put them in a realistic position to be successful, advance their career with my organization, and also drive a lot of value? And that's a fun win for us when we can create kind of that measured, balanced approach where you don't have to just go out and hire external talent. You have the opportunity to invest in the people who are really passionate and really care about the success of your team. One last quick comment around values and culture. We often find that the values and culture are very strong in the clients that we work with. Sometimes the values are rooted in the past, the legacy, right? So it's established, yes, maybe doesn't necessarily set the company up for the direction that it's going, the growth that it's stepping into. And so it's always a useful thing. You don't have to change it. Don't throw your values out the window, but taking a critical eye and saying, do these accentuate the behaviors that are going to help us be successful moving forward? So that's also part of the growth trajectory phase. Okay, so let's talk about org chart of the future. I'm going to go pretty quickly because we'll cover a lot of this when we get to the common challenges and then ways to avoid common challenges. There's kind of the big question. The big question is, if we continue to grow the way we think we can, when does our org structure start to break apart, start to fall down, start to become less effective? And Mary, you were just having a recent conversation where this came up. Would you mind sharing that conversation?
Yeah, so about a $40 million company in the engineering space who grew to 150 million pretty quickly over a period of like 5 years, found themselves at a point where their leadership was just feeling overwhelmed and stressed, and communication was difficult to disseminate throughout the organization. And it was like they had all these great people and such a tremendous market opportunity, but the company was starting to fracture. And after taking kind of a look at this, they just kept adding people under existing leaders, sometimes elevating someone to a role, but that whole functional area just became really large. And as a result of this, it created these silos within the organization. And it was even more difficult for the leaders of these functional areas to communicate with each other because they had so many people reporting to them and so many issues that they were trying to address and problems that they were trying to solve. And so it was really critical to take a step back and say, wow, this structure doesn't work anymore. How do we continue to grow and make decisions more quickly to respond to the marketplace, and get our functional areas to work more cohesively together? And as a result, we ended up having to completely restructure or look at restructuring this organization, which resulted in a lot of change. So they were at that breaking point. And I think that if we can look at structure as it relates to growth just more proactively, it can be smaller changes along the way that aren't so disruptive, to all of the people. So
Yeah. I think that's a great story, especially what that looks like on the enterprise side, right? Where you've got
yeah,
large teams, multiple layers of leadership, the coordination, the cross-functional collaboration starts to become business critical, giving your leaders a chance to actually lead rather than sort of cramming individual contributor expectations into their job descriptions. That's another common challenge we see. So creating true, leaders of functions, leaders of enterprises, if you will. If you're on the call, you're saying that's fun. I'd like to be there at some point in time. We have a lot of conversations with companies on the scaling side of the growth leadership model. And usually the conversation around the big question is, like in order to achieve your 5 or 7 year goals, how many people are you going to need on your team? How many sales reps are you going to need? Are you going to have operations in multiple regions? Because regional management is much different than everyone being local. Are you going to be acquiring companies? Are you going to add new lines of services? So there's all these, kind of questions where from the business plan, it looks pretty straightforward. But once you start extrapolating that business plan in terms of an org structure, it gets a lot more complicated. So we always there's like a spot, right? In any company's business plan where it's like, well, that's a good point. I guess I don't know exactly how that would work. That's where we hone in, and that's where we can add the most value. Now, I'll be very transparent. We're not going to do any tools to help you create your future org chart today. We just don't have enough time to do that. I do want to share with you what a tool looks like. So what you're seeing on the screen here is an example of the kind of exercise that we do, and we do it by function because we want to know what the growth looks like by function. And then you can kind of roll that back up in terms of the overall company org chart. But it's very healthy to compare and contrast what are the requirements of that function today in order to meet current business needs. And then based on anticipated business needs, and you can see this exercise has in 5 years, where do we think things are going to go up or down, right? How do we think things are going to change? That often is really good data, really good input that we can then use to start to translate into, looks like you need to add a layer of management. Looks like you need to add another shift. For example, if this is a production company, looks like you need to think about a new department to take on some of this extra work. What used to be done by one team needs to be done by 2 teams. And so, there's a lot of really, really good insights to come out of these kind of exercises.
And Rick,
Yeah.
Can you go back to that slide real quick?
Yeah.
So when we send out the tools, we're gonna include the functional tools for you, or the tools for each functional area?
I think we include just one, and it's just operations.
Okay.
If anyone wants more, we can send more.
Yeah.
So.
And
Yeah.
essentially, what you do is you can change the categories. These are just examples, but go through this exercise in each functional area, and then you reverse engineer it. And
That's
so
exactly right.
it works perfectly.
That's exactly right. Now, in terms of reverse engineering, it is important once you have your future org chart to understand what your leadership team is going to look like. That's a very, to call it very critical, it kind of doesn't do it justice, right? It's you have to have the right leadership team in place. You have to understand what level of leader, what kind of leader, what capabilities you're expecting out of your leadership team. Mary, do you just want to speak to the finance team specifically and how this future org chart plays such an important role in terms of leadership team readiness?
Yeah, I think we use finance a lot because it's interesting when we talk to our clients. A lot of times we'll ask, well, what role does your finance play today? Or somebody will tell us they have a controller or a chief financial officer. But when we start asking questions about how they're contributing to the organization, oftentimes we find that it is a very much different level of a finance role. And so, as you grow in your organization, to operate at the highest level of finance where you have more complexity, that finance leader is working typically side by side with the CEO and president and building models, pro formas, and looking at the ROI of investments and opportunities. And it's much more forward thinking, forward, planning. And so again, it's just really important to understand where you're at today and what kind of finance, skills and experience you need to support your business, but then what it needs to look like in the future. And so that's, those are some of the exercises that you go through.
Yeah, and Mary, as we were preparing, doing final prep for this webinar today, you shared a story, or kind of just like an anecdote where, especially on the search side of the business, if we're going to work with a client, there's often this knee-jerk reaction to just replace the person that was in the role before, right? Like,
Yeah.
we just loved Susan, just go find me another Susan. And that overlooks the opportunity to recalibrate the expectations of that role and maybe think about, well, what are we going to need in the next 5 years? And how is the role going to be different than it is today? And how do we find someone that we feel really good about it? Now, this step of the strategic roadmap, we call it leadership team readiness, because often what we have found is that your current leadership team, those are the people that have given the most to help your company grow. They're just very passionate, very committed. They're doing everything they can in order to make sure that the company can be successful. It's also a common challenge that the company grows at a faster pace than the leadership team has the ability to keep up. Explicitly, I'm not trying to say that that's an issue with any individual leadership team members. It's just a reality that many companies find themselves in, where they need leaders who have the right level of capability. And sometimes if you're focused on just kind of like growing the business day to day, you lose track in terms of what's actually expected out of that role. And so that leadership team readiness is a really healthy way to break down those leadership team positions and say, this is what we're going to need out in the future. Here's where you're well-equipped leader today. Here's some opportunities to gain some experience or maybe build some skills. And then it's also a way to have a more empathetic conversation. Is this even a role that you're interested in? Because that's not an uncommon reaction. I kind of like what I'm doing right now. I'm not sure I want to sign up for that future role. And so it's a healthier, more transparent, and more strategic way to say, am I building the leadership team that I need in order to be successful in the future?
And on the flip side, sometimes we meet with individual leaders who are fully capable of operating at a more strategic level. But guess what? The CEO, the owner, is playing in that role, or they're wearing that hat. And so they're not allowed to use that skill set and build that muscle. And so we see that a lot as well.
Yeah, very well said, Mary. Very, very well said. So that's that's a lot of content to go through, and I think what was about, I don't know, 15 minutes or so. So if you go out to our website, you can see this graphic. Andrew's on the call. I'm pretty sure you can see this graphic. If you can, it's going to be on the website very shortly.
By the end of the week.
By the end of the week. Okay, there we go. Thank you, Mary. And this has the full strategic talent roadmap process on there. You'll notice we didn't go through your development and hiring needs because that's usually pretty custom to the client after we cover the first 3 steps, which we just discussed. And then, of course, the strategic talent roadmap itself is kind of the document. It's the things you need to do in priority, in order of importance, in order to give more confidence to your business strategy. So the other nice thing is, once you have a STR, that document is yours. You own it, you take it, you use it however you want to help your company grow. So it's just been a lot of fun to start to roll this product out and build some STRs and see the impact that it's been able to make in these companies.
And I think too, having that strategic talent roadmap is really your business plan, but it's based on people. And so it should be looked at every year, and added to, and it's really kind of a living, breathing document, but it's mirroring your business strategy.
Yeah, and Mary, if I can, I don't often do this, but I'm gonna take a quick second and I'm just gonna stretch back, right? When I used to work in large, mature, publicly traded companies, this was a common practice, right? Because we needed to be able to communicate confidence that we had the ability to execute on what the growth that we were committing to. And we needed to be able to say, for example, here are the board of directors, here are the people on the succession plans, and here's how we're preparing for the next generation of leadership. Or here is our new line of service that we're building out, and here's how we can maintain good staffing levels and keep these individuals engaged so that they're going to want to stay, they're going to do great work, and it's going to create more confidence around our ability to be successful. This is a business critical component for any company looking to really grow sustainably and create confidence in their business goals. And so it's a lot of fun. I'll kind of go back to where I started. It's a lot of fun to bring these exercises that often kind of sit in boardrooms of very large enterprises and bring it to business owners and executives at these incredibly exciting entrepreneurial companies.
Awesome.
Okay, so future org chart. We've had enough of these conversations to know that's usually the thing that gets people the most excited, to see what their growth goals look like from an org structure perspective. We've also found that it's not always the most intuitive process. Mary, you were just talking about a pretty large client that we work with and how they struggled with this because there's this natural desire to just kind of incrementally build out. And spoiler alert, that's one of the challenges that we're going to touch on. I think what we're learning even internally is that as you do more work around an STR, it could be an incredibly engaging bit of content to share with your team. Hey, here's where we think we're going. Here's what our company could look like one day. We want you to be part of that. Here are the opportunities. So not only is this good for the leadership team to create confidence, but it can also create confidence at all levels of your organization. So let's talk about the first challenge. This is a challenge that we've talked about in some blogs and some other talks, and we refer to this challenge as the growth dilemma. And here's the deal with the growth dilemma. Growing companies, they need to get a lot done, and they often need to get a lot done quickly. And one of the results of kind of a fast pace but big strategic goals is that people chip in, right? They help when needed. And that makes sense, right? That's a fun part of working at an entrepreneurial organization. Left unchecked, you can wind up with teams that are really imbalanced. And so this is, what you're seeing on the screen is a bit hypothetical, but it is absolutely real. We work with a lot of companies who find themselves in this position. And what the percentages on the screen are communicating is that you've got the senior leader. In this case, we're looking at the executive leadership team, right? So you've got the CEO or the owner, and they're doing 25% of the sales leader's job, and they're doing 30% of the ops leader's job, and they're doing 60% of the marketing leader's job. And often it's not because the leadership team is ill-equipped or not working hard. Often it's because people are just moving really fast, right? And people are pitching in, and the CEO wants something to move faster, so they pitch in themselves. And again, on a short period of time, that's okay. That's just what you need to do to get things across the finish line. On a long period of time, you start to either hold leaders back, right? That was the scenario you were talking about, Mary, or you don't grow, the leaders don't grow at the same pace as the business is growing. And that's the scenario that I was talking about. And so there's kind of this rebalancing or right sizing that needs to happen. Now, the other thing I like to say about the growth dilemma is that this can exist at all levels of the organization, right? This is not an uncommon challenge even for middle managers to struggle with. I'd actually say it's probably harder for a middle manager to navigate the growth dilemma. But it is absolutely something that the future org chart can start to help and clarify. So, the challenge is that left unchecked, this will almost assuredly happen because growing companies, entrepreneurial companies, they want to go fast, they want to do a lot, and that's going to just make rules hard to define and hard to hold people accountable over a period of time. And then, as I just mentioned, it can happen at all levels. So how do I avoid doing this? Some of these are big, some of these are small. Succession planning is kind of one of the bigger ones, right? The value of succession planning is not who's going to take my job. That's kind of often the emotional reaction behind succession planning. Succession planning is much more, are we building a bench of leaders? So as I need to hand stuff off so that I can elevate myself, I'm confident in the bench of leaders that I'm handing stuff off to. Anticipating growth, I think that's pretty much what we've been talking about for the past 35, 40 minutes here is how do I understand what the roles are going to look like in the next 3 to 5 years? And then this is a big one, external benchmarks. A lot has changed even since the pandemic, right? It's been a pretty hectic past 5 years. It's important, if not essential, to make sure you're keeping pace with external trends. And that can sometimes be an uncomfortable position. I've had some of these conversations even in the past couple of months with leadership teams that have not been keeping up with external benchmarks and find themselves very well positioned to drive technical activity in their organization, relatively ill-equipped to lead leaders, lead functions, lead enterprises. So keeping pace with external benchmarks are very important. Okay, Mary, you mentioned we have a competency, a skill set that defines what good leadership looks like in a growth organization. What we have found is that growth leadership as a skill set is actually easier to define in its contrast. And its contrast is flat leadership. Critically, the opposite of growth leadership is not bad leadership. Bad leaders get fired, okay? What you need to worry about are flat leaders. And flat leaders are often, much more committed to the status quo. They're slower to change. They like precedence. That top bullet, I think, is important too. Avoids uncertainty, seeks easily attainable goals. This is new. So I've talked about flat leadership and growth leadership before. I've never used animals as a reference point.
I like that.
You do? Okay, so
Yeah.
this is brand new. I kind of think flat leaders are like turtles, right?
Yeah.
And I even would go so far as to say the hard shell. It's kind of hard to penetrate, to influence. A turtle is what a turtle's going to do what a turtle knows how to do. It's kind of slow plodding progress. Growth leaders, I think, are a little bit more like hawks or eagles. They can see things off in the distance. They know strategically how to position themselves. They're fast and dynamic and can make a big impact relatively quickly. So they look at challenges and failures as opportunities, right? They have that kind of hungry, ambitious attitude. They're much more committed to acting as a facilitator or a guide. So they're not so worried about maintaining their technical expertise. They're interested in making sure their team is well set up to be successful. And they understand the value of risk and ambiguity and can navigate accordingly. So if you're worried about having flat leaders in your organization, which is a big, big concern with a lot of the entrepreneurial clients that we work with, first and foremost, you need to say, am I elevating technical experts? Because that, as you start to think about what it takes to get to successive parts of the growth leadership model, technical experts will slow down your progress because they're more committed to the craft than they are to actually leading people. Another big challenge is when you add a layer of management. Companies can sometimes fight layers of management, adding a layer of management, because it just makes things harder. It's a different skill set. So making sure you have growth leaders in place will make transitioning and adding a layer of management much, much easier in the long term. So in terms of how to avoid, the first two bullets are kind of the same. Because once you have leadership expectations defined, then you can start equipping and training and building those leadership skills. Now, like Mary mentioned, if you want to take, I'm not going to say the easy path, but the more efficient path, we have growth leadership competencies. We're happy to talk about what they are and how they work and how they can help your company as well. The third bullet, management processes. My favorite one to talk about is performance management, setting goals, coaching, giving feedback, evaluating performance. Often viewed as bureaucratic, essential to ensure your managers are set up to lead in larger organizations. Gives you confidence that people are working on the right stuff, holds people accountable. Are they doing the things that they need to do? So, management processes, it's not red tape. It's actually the habits, the muscle that leaders build in order to lead effectively in a growing company. Okay, last challenge. We already covered this one to a certain extent. The big question, right? When does my org structure break based on my growth goals? So the main thing here is you can get away for a certain period of time by adding a role or two on a team, right? And maybe that gets you to the end of the year, maybe it gets you to the end of next year. At some point in time, you're going to find yourself with managers who have teams of 10 or 12, and they're going to be burnt out and stressed, and the teams are going to start to struggle. So you need to be really sensitive to the fact when just incremental additions don't work anymore. Mary, you just leaned in. Do you have something to say?
No.
You don't. Okay. Okay. Now, as you start looking longer term, you need to start thinking about structure. And does the structure align with the strategy? When I talked about M&A activity, adding a new line of service, going regional where it used to be local, those are all strategy decisions that will have big, big impacts on your structure. So these are common challenges, right? Some things to think about to avoid these common challenges. Of course, ideal team size, and we've kind of touched on that already. I would also talk about the timing for hiring leaders. There can be a desire to build out the team and then sort of place the leader on top, almost as if it was a cherry. If that's kind of your natural instinct, I would challenge and I would say, consider hiring that leader a little bit earlier. The leader can build out the team as they see they need it, and that leader then feels more bought in, more engaged, and set that leader up for success. And then, of course, based on our growth goals, if we were to really achieve everything that we wanted to from a business strategy perspective, what kind of impact would that have on our organization? How would that change our structure? Okay, Mary, we did it. We
We
made
did
it
it.
all the way through the content with 6 minutes to go. That's almost an eternity in terms of my performance in past webinars. I'm very proud of this. So on the screen here, we have a picture of the tool that we'll send out. So this will be part of your email, follow-up email. We'll make sure that a PDF of these tools and resources are included. I'm very curious in the chat if you could share either an aha or an action you're going to take. And I always like focusing on actions because you just invested an hour of your time. You're a busy leader yourself. You should know what you can do with the content that you were shared. So, Mary, you and I can just kind of chit chat for a minute, and we'll give everyone an opportunity to, in the chat, share either an aha or an action you're going to take.
I'm proud of you, Rick.
Thank you. Thank you. I know everyone's thinking, but I was given 8 minutes to make, I don't know, what would it be, like a little TED Talk a couple weeks ago, about a month ago, and I did it in 6. That was my business best for the month, I think. Okay,
Rick is
so
very, very passionate about these topics.
I am passionate, and I think that's a good thing, but I think
Yeah.
succinctness is a good thing too. So it's my development opportunity. And thank you for joining. She's going to digest. Sarah, you're going to lay out your 5-year org chart. That's a great place to start. It's going to drive a lot of good conversation, I think. Got some people chatting. Oh, Alexa, times with your rock.
Awesome.
That makes me happy. Anytime we can support someone's projects, some rocks.
Yeah. A lot of times you have it in your head, and that's great, but putting it on paper does really help and getting everybody on the same page.
And excited too, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a motivational opportunity for individuals.
Awesome.
All right. Well, we can hang out here for a couple extra minutes. That was, like I said, that was all we had.
Yeah.
Thank you all for attending. We'll be sending out the recording. Okay, Garrett, you're going to do the 5-year plan, reverse engineer the whole company and oh man, I like that.
Awesome.
Allison hearted that. That was the appropriate response, Allison. Thank you.
And, I would just like to add that I love talking to other business owners about these topics, regardless, as a business owner myself. And so if you just want to chat through some ideas, challenges, I'm always here and available. So
yeah.
And I know Rick is as well.
Mary, you have a network and a set of experiences that is broad and deep. So anyone would be fortunate to get to chat through a situation with you. I'm just bragging on your behalf a little bit.
Well, it's fun because, as I mentioned, we're doing this for our own company,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Pat, I'm just going to spotlight your comment thinking about complexity of the company. Mike Frommel, he kind of shares this set of reactions that he often runs into, and it's either, oh, our growth goals are going to be harder to hit than we anticipated, right? Like we didn't actually think through some of the aspects of, and then other times it's, we need to increase our growth. Like we've got the capacity to do more than we're giving ourselves credit for. So I think kind of having that clarity, understanding the impact is a really neat outcome from this exercise. Excellent. All right. Well, I think we've heard from everybody. I think we can wrap up for the day. Thank you again. It's been a lot of fun. Hopefully our paths will cross again soon. If not, you know how to find us should questions come up in the near or long term. So thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.